Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about, and I mentioned this, are interests, rights, and power. All right, so here's kind of the story. A miner is at work. He has boots stolen from him. He goes and complains to the shift boss. The shift boss points to a sign on the wall that says, "We are not responsible for lost and stolen items." So what should and so then the miner gets mad and tries to convince a couple of his buddies to strike, which would shut down. And then later the supervisor said he would have simply replaced the boots. So what's the problem with, is there a problem with replacing the boots?
Once you replace one person's boots, everyone's going to want to do it.
What happens when the next person loses an iPhone? Or something? And should a place of employment be responsible for personal items? In most cases, if you have places where you store stuff, most people would have a locker or somewhere, and you know, not getting into it, it's more conceptual here. But yeah, if you replace the boots, then you're opening yourself to anything else that goes missing. So the question is then, there's three ways to solve this problem. The first is called to reconcile interest. So if we are reconciling interest, what is the miner's interest? What's the miner want? Wants a boot replaced. Okay, so what's that cost the company? $100. Okay, maybe a pair of boots. What's it going to cost the company if the miner is serious and actually organizes a strike?
A lot more.
So in that case, is it worth spending $100 to replace the boots to stave off a perceived strike, or is the liability for replacing the boots greater than maybe standing your ground there and saying, no, we're not going to replace any lost or stolen items? I mean, the strike would be more, but once again, then in the short term, you're opening yourself up to a liability if anything gets something lost or stolen. So it's a tough call. And so, but what they tell you is, if we can, what's the simplest thing to do here? It's called reconcile interest. What can we do that will make the miner happy and make the company happy? If we can do that, then that is said to be the quickest, the cheapest way to solve any resolution, is to reconcile interest. So let's figure out something so that we can come to an agreement that both of us are going to live with. So what are our options if we can't come to that agreement? Well, the second thing is to try to prove who's right. In our system, and I've mentioned this before, how do we prove somebody's right? Court system, right. We go to court. And then the court renders a verdict. And what happens after the court renders a verdict?
You can appeal, or you're just stuck with
Okay, but let's just say it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Then you're stuck with it. So one person's right, but then what happens to the other party? They lose, right? It's a win-lose situation. So what's going to happen? And so anybody know how in a situation like this with the union, how they would solve that problem? You guys familiar? They have what's called a grievance process. So in this case, if the company said, no, we're not replacing the boots, then the miner could file a grievance, and they would have a hearing, and then you would have 3 company people and 3 union people, and those people would decide. So it's like a mini court system within the union, though. So they will have that to air. They're called grievances. So at the end of the grievance, though, let's just say the company wins and they say, we're not going to replace the boots. What's going to be the attitude of that employee? Is he going to be a good worker? Probably not. So he'll probably, and if any of you guys had Dr. Blass in an HR class, and what he says is when employees get disgruntled, they steal toilet paper. Okay, that's his way of looking at it. He said, you're going to steal enough toilet paper till he gets $100 worth of toilet paper to replace the boots. Okay, or he's going to be unproductive enough that in his mind he's hurting the company for that $100 that they should have paid. So anytime you go and prove who's right versus wrong, you have a winner and a loser, and you've got to consider the attitude of the loser. And one other way, and this is, and my exposure with it is a lot of it's in sports, but also I had a contractor add on to my house, and in the contract we signed, he said, there was a clause that said, if there is a disagreement, both parties agree to binding arbitration. Okay, you guys familiar with that term? No? Okay, so what it is to stay out of the court system, which is very expensive, and this guy's a contractor. He's working on houses and probably people with a lot more money than me, but does he want to go to court against somebody, some of these rich people that he's building houses for or doing work for? No, because you guys agree that in the court system, whoever has more money generally might have it's not a level playing field. So there's a clause in there that says you will agree to binding arbitration. So there are people out there that are certified arbiters. So you would go before this person, I would present my case, the contractor would present his case, and the arbiter would make a ruling which was considered binding. Now, if I didn't sign that contract, he wouldn't have done the work for me because he was taking the courts out of play. And that's just something to keep in mind. You guys, as small business owners, you can put that clause in a contract. Ask your attorney who's drawing up your contract about binding arbitration, and that way it keeps you out of the legal thing. And I know I've got an article, it's on my desk, I meant to bring it, I forgot, but about a couple of baseball players. So at the end of a baseball season, if a baseball player can't come to a contract agreement, then they can submit for arbitration. The company says, we're willing to pay you, we think you're worth $6 million, and the player says, well, I want 7.2, and then the arbiter will throw out a figure generally somewhere in there. In the statistics on the article I have, it said the company, the Major League Baseball teams, won, I want to say like 70% of the arbitrations. It was closer to their number than it was the players. And I don't know if it didn't give any rationale for that. But that's just the way, once again, right versus wrong. Now in this case, you're still getting, these people are still getting decent money, so it's not, you don't really have that winner-loser mentality, but it's only usually for 1 year. And at that point, then you either sign a long-term deal or become a free agent and move on. All right, so the third thing we can do, there's no way to decide who's right, then we can exercise power. This is always the last thing you want to do. So the miners going out on strike, what is that trying to show? Power. Who has power? Okay, we'll show you. What can the economic effects of a strike be? I mean, it could be devastating to a company depending on how long they stay out. Now, there's a lot of factors in that. A lot of it's called the strike fund. Union people, a lot of them live paycheck to paycheck, so how long can they actually afford to stay out without going to work? Well, unions have, like insurance, it's called a strike fund, so that they can pay their people if they ever have to go out on strikes. Yes?
Isn't it common that there's also people that don't work with unions? Like I know, like unions, they're legally not allowed to force people to be in a union.
They have to win certification, and if you read the paper in Tallahassee this past year, Tallahassee Community College just decided to go union, but it's a process that you go through. I don't know that you can absolutely keep them out, but good, smart companies will try to treat their employees such that that doesn't come into play.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I might understand that, but it's like a company could probably like fire some of the union people and like bring in some people out.
But there's all kinds of repercussions to that too, with the Labor Relations Board, and you have to, basically it comes down to a vote of your organization. So what happened at TCC, the union comes in and starts courting them and going, hey, you need to really unionize and let us represent you. We're going to get you lower class loads, we're going to get you higher pay, and we've had all this success. It's the UFF, United Faculty of Florida, and you need to let us represent you. So if enough faculty members vote for that union, then they're certified. And so that's what's going on right now with TCC, and they're having a hard time coming to an agreement.
So, if you're not like in a right to work state, like where you have the option of like having unions and not having unions, if you're not in one of those states, do you have to be in a union if like the company that you're a part of has unions?
No.
No?
Is my understanding. Okay, now I can tell you for like Florida,
Yeah.
right to work state, the faculty are union, I'm not a member. Okay, they can't, I don't think they can force you to join that union and pay dues. All right, in some states, yes, they can. And one of the big moves, and this is, it's more into economics than it is anything else, but I know South Carolina. Anybody know what's going on in South Carolina, Charleston, as far as like jobs and all? it's busting out. And what happened? Boeing, 4 years ago, opened a plant in Charleston. Well, their headquarters is Seattle, Washington. Why do you think Boeing wanted a plant in Charleston?
Right to work.
It's a right to work state, and there's no union there. And Boeing's union in Seattle filed suit against Boeing, saying that you are doing this to get away from union. And Boeing won the case, my understanding, because they didn't cut any jobs in Seattle. Okay, they just added a place in Charleston. But now, what happens if Seattle goes out on strike?
They have more leverage.
Boeing's not shut down. Exactly. So it was a great play. Volvo just built a plant and is I don't think it's open yet. It's opening in Charleston. Housing in Charleston's getting tight, crowded there now because a lot of these people are flocking. Greenville, South Carolina already has a BMW plant. A lot of these companies are moving to the south to these non-right-to-work states so they can stay away from the whole union thing.
Yeah, a lot of times now the recent trend is also for states to give incentives. So sometimes they'll like buy the land and give a lease on like a reduced rate. It's like BMW is one of the first ones to come to the United States in Alabama. But I think they did the numbers of like each job created in Alabama from the BMW, or maybe it was Mercedes-Benz.
Mercedes
It's like-
is outside of Tuscaloosa.
Okay,
right.
so that's what it was.
BMW's in
Mercedes-Benz.
Charleston.
Yeah, Mercedes-Benz in Alabama was 300,000 jobs.
Hyundai just went to Elba, Alabama, this small town outside of Dothan. But look at it, $18,000. They're paying $18, $19 an hour. So people in that country town, that is a ton of money. Plus, the cost of living is so cheap. Plus, they have health insurance and all and benefits. So it is a great job in those small towns, and it's keeping manufacturing jobs here. So yeah, it makes economic sense for the state to give that when you consider those people are now going to pay tax on the house, they're going to pay income tax, they're going to pay sales tax on everything they purchase. Purchasing are going to go up. People are buying more. Guarantee you they can make their money back in that in a short time.
Could you define like right to work?
Right to work just says that they can't force you, and it's not concrete. So basically it says that I can fire you without cause, is technically how it's defined. And if you're a right to work state, I don't have to have cause. But that doesn't mean you can't sue the court and sue and win a wrongful termination lawsuit.
Okay. So if you were to say that isn't right to work, like they need to justify it.
Right.
justify
And it may have something to do with the union. Once again, that's a great question for a lawyer. But it's a more worker-friendly environment for the company. It gives the company more leverage. But, and you talked about, somebody mentioned some companies walking away. You guys know FedEx Ground? You've heard of that company? When Roadways started it was called RPS. And what they did is all the drivers, instead of being employees of the company, they made them independent contractors. They leased them their truck. That route belonged to the driver. He could sell it at any time. So a couple of those, so like UPS is heavy union. They are one of the strongest International Brotherhood of Teamster unions. So that was going to be a competitive advantage, and FedEx Ground is still independent contractors. And what they did, I know a guy he was executive vice president of operations. He basically ran the whole company. They shut down a couple of locations where the union came in up in the Northeast and certified. They just closed the plant and said, we won't deliver in this area anymore, because they did not want the union creeping in to that company. So you can do that, but that's kind of, and Frito-Lay just did, not Frito-Lay, Hostess, Twinkies. 2-3 years ago, they went to the union and said, we need concessions. The union said, we're not going to give them, and they shut the plant down. Now, you can still buy Twinkies now. They sold the brand, but the actual Hostess brand itself shut down because the union was not willing to give concessions. So there's a lot of negotiation that goes on within unions. And when you look at companies like General Motors, one of the big advantages that Honda and Toyota and some of the foreign motors have about now is Hyundai now. Probably what, $3,000 or $4,000 cheaper than you can buy a local car. Well, what happened to GM, Ford, and those companies? Heavy up in Michigan. Okay, somebody tell me about the economy in Michigan right now. It's tanked. Okay, why? Well, things were going really good, and so the company is really nice to the union. They negotiate these really great pensions. So these guys retired. They're making 70% of their salary retired, and the company's then having to pay somebody 100% of that salary to produce a car. So last figures I saw was between $1,500 and $1,800 extra that GM and Ford and Chrysler had to charge for a car just to handle their pension liability. And that's why you guys don't have pensions anymore. Any of the jobs that you guys have anymore, it's not a sustainable model. You can't pay somebody not to work and pay somebody to work. And that's why the beauty of the 401k, what happens when you change jobs? Pick it up, take it with you to the next job. And but that's your retirement. You're not going to get the check in the mail like a lot of your parents did. So that's one of the big changes. Okay, so power, exerting power. Once again, there's not going to be a good outcome. At the end of that, it's going to either hurt the union really bad. It's going to, in most cases, in that situation, it hurts both parties. What happens when the company starts losing business? Layoffs, right. So it starts hurting the workers. And great case, I don't want to go into it, but I'm just sitting watching, and I view things differently than most people, just from a business aspect. But this deal that's going on in the NFL right now, I'm just looking, and I look at it from a business perspective and go, wow, these guys, and whatever they do, I don't really have a strong opinion, don't care. But I sit and look and going, these guys are killing their fan base, their customers. And what happens if customers, I saw a Jacksonville game a couple of weeks ago, there was like just tons of seats open. Part of it's because it sucked. Easy.
Calm down.
Reality hurts sometimes, doesn't it?
We're on the up and up.
It's a rebuilding year.
We've been saying that for
This is one of our peak years.
No, but it's same thing. If the union goes out on strike with UPS and all of a sudden it hurts your customers, guess what? Your customers are now going to find other venues. So you got to look at the end result of all that happened. So two definitions you need to do. So the first is called lumping it. Okay, lump it. And that would be if the miner just dropped his claim. If he said, you know what, it ain't worth it for $100, I'm just going to drop the claim. So that's called lump it. Okay, but the other form is called withdrawal. Withdrawal. That would be if the miner just quit his job and just said, you know what, I don't want to work for a company that treats their employees this way, so he's just going to withdraw from the situation. Unfortunately, in union situations, withdrawal is rarely an answer because those guys are making too much money and have too good a job, and they can't just replace that job somewhere. And I remember a UPS driver, this is years and years ago, came in and was delivering where I was working, and the guy was just bitching the whole time. And I go, what? I mean, he goes, I hate my job. And I go, well, why don't you go quit and do something else? He goes, well, I can't find one I can make as much money. Okay, so then shut up. Yeah. All right. So with all those things, there's a term. It's called cost of disputing. And I'm going to give you 4 things that go under this heading. So all of these, yes?
Are all these notes going to be on?
These are not. That's what I said at the first of class. There's only a couple things here that are online, so you need good notes from this section. If you have good notes, though, this test is very easy. Okay, so either get them from somebody. So I said, you guys as a class, somebody put out, work together and put out a study guide. Sell it. I'll be an entrepreneur.
Did you say this section would be like for the entire exam?
For this, there's like just a small amount of material for exam 3. Right, coming up. All right, so cost of disputing. The first is called transaction cost. That's very easy. That is the cost of the boots in the story that I just told you. That is a transaction cost. What's it going to cost to solve the dispute? And we can look at it from transaction cost. Okay, had the strike occurred, then the mine still has overhead costs, you still got rent, you got shutdown. So the transaction cost, if we looked at it solely from transaction cost in this situation, the mine would buy the boots. Satisfaction with the outcome is the second cost we got to look at. Even if one party doesn't get everything they want, they can still be satisfied that it was fair. So if it goes to the grievance committee and they hear it and they come back with a ruling, what more can you ask as an employee? Or if you guys, there's student judicial stuff here. If you get a hearing and you feel like it was fair, doesn't necessarily go your way, but you got your day in court, you feel like the process was fair, then you can still have satisfaction with the outcome, even if the outcome wasn't exactly what you wanted to have it happen. Number 3, and I mentioned this before, effect on the relationship. Okay, effect on the relationship. What happens if we don't replace the boots? That minor is not going to he's not going to be a good employee, at least for a short time, because he's going to be aggravated with the company that they didn't replace his boots. It wasn't his fault. They were stolen. So why shouldn't you replace that? They were on work premises. And generally in that situation, employees try to inflict cost damage on the employer. Okay, number 4 is called reoccurrence. Reoccurrence. That is a cost. And you guys got that right from the start. If we buy the boots, then what's to prevent the next person? And do you have a legal problem if you replace the boots and then the next person that loses something, you tell them you're not going to replace it? Yeah. Now you're going to pick and choose what you're going to replace? What's that in law called? Do you guys know what that term is?
Precedent?
Precedent, right. And so judges look at, well, there's been a ruling before, and it's crazy because it doesn't even have to be a right ruling. But if somebody in the past has ruled on it before, they'll say, well, there was a precedent in Gore versus U.S. that said this. And that becomes kind of law. Yes?
Can you go back over the second one?
The second one? Satisfaction with the outcome? Okay, so that's just how you're treated in the process. Okay, how you're treated in the process. Okay, and the third one, effect on relationship. And the fourth is reoccurrence. All right, so are there times when it may be necessary to decide who's right? Do you think of a situation?
If there are unreasonable demands, just so they can try to see what they're able to get.
Okay. Anything, let me give you a couple of actual cases. You guys remember, and this is going back in history, Brown versus Board of Education? Okay, when a student was locked out of a school because of their race. Okay, what would have happened had they solved that reconciled interest at the local level?
Wouldn't have been a national impact.
Wouldn't have had a national impact. It would have still been going on, and going on. So in that case, can you see the value of taking that all the way to the Supreme Court to try to determine who's right? Just recently, we had one that was the Affordable Health Care Act. 21 states filed suit against the federal government and said you can't force people to buy health insurance. So that was fast-tracked to the Supreme Court, skipped all the appeals part because we had to find out who was right. So are there times when finding out who's right is preferable? Absolutely. When there's an issue that years ago, Roe v. Wade, okay, abortion, is it legal, is it not? You got different states doing different things, then that's a situation that you need the Supreme Court to weigh in on. And yes?
Do you know how they rule in the Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, they actually ruled in favor of the government. That was the one that Roberts, who was the Chief Justice, they basically did an end run and they ended up calling it a tax. So they said it wasn't, we're not forcing you to buy, they called it a tax, was their verbiage to be able to get around it. Okay, but it's interesting, and I can't wait. At the end of my managing growth class, I have a guy coming in and he sells health insurance for a living. He's the only guy I know that's ever read all 2,100 pages of the Health Care Act. And he's an old guy, ain't got much to do, but no, he's very knowledgeable on it. So I'm going to be very interested to hear his take on where he thinks it's going, because it's going somewhere. Just where it's going. And once again, are there negotiations going on up there? Yeah, and no consensus, so it's a mess.
I just wanted to comment on the whole thing with that. The reason, the huge problem with what they're doing over there is because of the 16th Amendment. And it's basically where the government can tax anyone for anything. So even though it's more because it's like a tax on life, they can do it anyways. For example, like California, where they want to tax people for being athletic and working out because they use more carbon, they can legally do that too under the 16th Amendment.
I mean, but then you also have, you know, one of the worst taxes is the estate tax. Are you guys familiar with that at all?
Oh, that's terrible.
Any money I have in my pocket, I've already paid tax on, and what I have now is after tax, right? So then, when you die, and look, it's gone up. A few years ago, back when my parents were doing estate, it was $1 million was all you could pass to each of your kids, and the rest of that, you know what the tax rate is on that? 45%. So now it's up to, I think the exemption is $10 million. But you had like large farmers in Iowa, places like that, the value of their farm, just the land was worth over that. Families having to sell farm to pay the tax, to pay the death tax when their parents die. I mean, it's crazy. And there's also something that says you can't have double taxation. Well, somebody explained to me how legally taxing people on their death of money they've already paid taxes on is not taxing somebody twice. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on up there that's not necessarily right. So some of you guys need to run and get up there and fix it.
Let's repeal the 16th Amendment. There you go.
They don't care. I mean, they don't care. All right. So that's pretty much it. So interest, rights, and power. Always want to try, if we can, to reconcile interest. Cheapest, fastest, easiest, smoothest. Dangers of proving whose right is. It's a win-lose situation. Same thing with power. Generally, exercising power, you're going to have a winner and a loser. And even in a lot of situations, both parties may be hurt. All right, so then now let's look at we're going to talk about the negotiation chart. This one should be familiar. It's kind of similar to the one that we just discussed last time, only I like these terms a little better. So if you look, our axis to the left is the importance of the relationship, and this is on Blackboard. And to the bottom is our importance of outcome. And so same thing, that lose-lose is called avoidance. There's no reason to actually, the time, it's not worth putting in the time, and that's because the relationship's not important and the outcome's not important. It's not something I have to do. Far to the right, competition, and that's win at all costs. It's a win to lose. Importance of outcome is very high. Relationships not very high. That is very characteristic of a distributive negotiating situation. In the upper left is the accommodation. We talked about that, lose to win. And I think in the other model it's called yielding, which is the same thing. I'm going to accommodate you. I'm going to give in the short term. Generally, I'm trying to preserve the relationship or either build a relationship that we're going to have an ongoing future business relationship, and that's more important than winning this first negotiation. And then towards the right is where we're hoping to get. And that's our definition of our integrated negotiation, and that is what's something that you'll be happy with, I'll be happy with. And I think I've mentioned before, Firehouse Subs had a big negotiation with Frito-Lay, and that's one of those, you've got to get in that collaborative deal where it can be a win-win for both parties. And then you see that big box in the middle is compromise. And I'm not sure if it's on the notes or not, but there's 3 reasons why you might compromise. One is the collaborative doesn't seem possible. We're at the point where it doesn't seem like there is a win-win situation. Both parties are anchored firmly in kind of what they think they need for this deal. Second is the parties are short on time. And guys, compromise, the most time compromise happens is when there's a deadline coming and you're at an impasse, and then both parties will try to agree to something that we've got to get this done. So deadline forces a lot of compromise, which goes back to what I told you all along. If you have time in a negotiation, you are in a position of strength. If you can wait it out. If you've got to get a deal done by a certain time, then it puts pressure on you. And the third thing is both parties gain something or don't lose anything. So if we look at it going, we're better off compromising and getting this deal done than we are coming to a standoff and having no deal at all. And that's why compromise will happen. So you guys have had that a couple times. Should be pretty familiar with that. All right, then the third thing that's up here goes along with that, the story. Let me see if I can find the... And read the article. It's in your files, and it's called Dreams on a Shelf. Okay, and this is in your notes too, and you need to know these. All right, so that Dreams on a Shelf was Matt Harrington. He was a number 6 pick in the overall draft. He was offered, and this is out of high school, okay? Kid never played college, never went to college, and he was offered $4 million for 2 years. Pretty much guaranteed money. His agent told him he was worth $4.9 million. And they basically walked away from the deal. Okay, Mr. Raleigh. Smart deal? At what point would you think to know the club was serious when they said, this is our final offer? I mean, you think they play games and...
No, I mean, they don't really just throw out $4 million to high school kids.
Right. And you think it was smart for that agent to set a number before the negotiation ever started?
No, it comes off as, I don't want to negotiate, see what it's going to get.
Exactly. And at some point, guys, they're going to walk away. And that's just, I mean, to me, it's crazy. And so who do you think bears more responsibility, the player, the parents, or the agent?
I guess, what's the age of the player, right? Is the only
Okay, the player. Okay, this is an 18-year-old kid coming out of high school.
It's not hard to say yes to $4 million.
Okay.
Like, if you offer me $4 million right now, you best be certain I'm gonna say yes.
Well, think about it. And so these ladies were in here before class talking about this job, and let's just say you get a really good job out of college, and you're making $50,000, which would be pretty good starting money. Well, you guys, then I can tell you it is, because I know people that are starting at 40, 45, accountants starting at 50, 51, 52. How many years you got to work to make $4 million at 50,000? It's 80. Okay, so I think I don't put as much on the kid, because at 18 years old I would have been relying pretty heavily on my parents at that point, and I would think as a parent, if my kid at 18 had been offered that, he would have signed. Yeah, or it would have been forged or something, but it would have got, the deal would have got done. But I also put some on the agent. What's the agent? Why do you hire that agent?
To know you better, to know these things.
Aren't they supposed to know that business and get the deal done? And they end up suing the agent, and I don't know how that case turned out if you read that whole thing, but it's almost malpractice on the agent, in my opinion, telling them that you're going to get $4.9 million, and if you don't get it, walk away. I mean, that's just, it's crazy. So here's the things that went wrong, and here's the solutions to them. And this is, you don't need to take, these are on, should be on your notes. Mistake 1, viewing the negotiation as a fixed pie. Don't assume your interests are exactly opposite of the other party. So the solution is to share information. Try to get out there something, a trade-off maybe. So in this situation, this is made to order for expanding the pie. What could they have asked for?
Some sort of incentives.
Incentives. Okay, if my guy leads the league, he was a pitcher. If he leads the league in strikeouts, if he leads the league in ERA, innings pitched, and why would the company be willing to pay more if that guy met those benchmarks?
It's a win-win.
Why are they going to pay more though?
They're going to pay more because he's doing better, so the team.
He's going to have value. You know, what's their goal? To get this kid to the major leagues and to win games? If you're doing that and you meet these benchmarks, then yeah, okay, I'll pay you a little more as long as you're as good as we think you are. And that's one thing that you guys don't forget either. The problem with a lot of jobs you get is you got to figure out how to measure incentives. In this case, it's pretty easy. Your ERA, your strikeouts, there's measurable things. But in your jobs, if you guys take a job, is there some kind of incentive you can ask for that, hey, okay, I'll start with this, but what's out there that I can make more money later? What can I do to increase efficiency, reduce cost or something that I can make more money? And you do that by talking, sharing information. Mistake number 2, anchoring on the first offer. $4.9 million, we're not budging. Which speculation was too, if you read deeper into it, that he would have been the number 1 pick overall in the draft, but 5 or 6 teams already passed on him because the agent had said 4.9, we're not budging. So he actually dropped in the draft because of that. And there's other, yeah.
So he came out before the draft saying that?
Yeah, it's agent. Just said
Showed all
basically.
his cards like that? That seems very strange.
It's not, I mean, that's why they filed suit against the agent. I think that is, once again, I think it's borderline malpractice.
Seems like if he was worth that much, they would have gotten a better agent.
I mean, the third time around, they end up getting, I think it said Scott Boras.
Parents didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, but supposedly this guy was respected and he was, represented some clients and, because you're paying that agent too.
Yeah.
Who was the agent?
His name was Tommy Tanzer. You ever heard of him? That's why. But I think it says he got Boras like the third time around, but the two good deals had already passed. And so Scott Boras, you heard of that name, right? Yeah, he's pretty well known. But by that time, it had already passed. And the other, I guess the biggest trouble was the guy's a pitcher. And in that case, a position player, Matt Harper, Bryce Harper that came out a few years ago. If you're really, really good, it's going to transition. Pitching, you can have an arm, any kind of little arm deal, and next thing you know, never be effective again. So it was a bad deal the whole way around. Okay, anchoring on the first offer, saying $4.9 million, we're not budging. So the solution to that is reject anchors, be flexible, do your homework, listen to what the other party's telling you. At some point, somebody had to get the message that we're not going higher than $4 million. Number 3 mistake, escalating commitment. He made the same mistake 4 years in a row. He was so mad at the $1.25 million. Okay, that's the next year. You still got $1.25 on the table. And he was so mad because he got 4 the year before, they turned that down. I'll show him. Then he got like $300,000 the next year, and the next year he signed as like basically, I don't know if he got drafted, like he got a shot, and he never made it. His numbers kept getting worse and worse each year. So the solution to that is don't dwell on the past. Each negotiation's a new one. What happened previously doesn't matter. All that mattered was that year of independent ball he played. Never mind his senior year in high school. You got another body of work in front of you. And that's why why can you negotiate more money with jobs when you have second and third job? When you have a job and your skill set should be better, right? You've got more things at your job, you learn things. And one of my good friends that was a consultant his whole life, he encourages students, and I'm a little, I understand where he's coming from. I'm not totally on board, but he says unless you're moving in the company you're with, you should look at changing jobs every 2 years. Just simply because you're learning something different, learning a skill. My only question in that is, as an employer who's hired people, if I see somebody leaving jobs every 18 months to 2 years, at some point, I'm gonna look at that because turnover is expensive, it costs money to hire and train, and I'm looking for somebody who's gonna stay with me. And I had a guy in one of my classes the other day, a guest speaker. He said there's people actually in interviews when they ask them how long, what do you see for your future? And they say, I see being here 1 year. Guys, do not say that. Okay? Even if you plan on being there 1 year. If you told me if I'm trying to hire you and I'm going to commit 6 months in a training program to you, and then have you go out and work and you go, oh yeah, I'm going to be here for a year. That's not a good investment. So you need to say, I'm going to be CEO of this company, or I'm going to work here, I want to be here 10 years. I want to move up in the company. But so don't dwell on the past. Mistake number 4, feeling too confident. Even after slipping each draft, he still believed he was a first round selection. Well, he wasn't, because he didn't get drafted in the first round. So what's the answer to that mistake? Consider the opposite. Before the negotiation, consider all the possibilities, reflect on the fact your assumptions might not be correct. I might not be a first round pick anymore. Number 5, focusing too narrowly on the issues. Harrington was so focused on his short-term goals, he failed to see how it would affect him and his family if he didn't sign a deal. I mean, in today's time, is $4 million a lot of money? Is it like I quit money at age 18? Probably not. I mean, you'd have to have very, very good investments to be able to make enough money to survive on and live on the whole time. Oh, but out of that $4 million, what are you going to lose right off the top? About 25-30% in taxes. So it's down to, it's state tax. Well, he's from California. So he's probably going to lose, 30% right off the top. So we're down to 2.8 million. But can that change some dynamics of the family, even with that much money? Yeah, it can give you some cushion to go out and if you're conservative with it. And I know some guys that, you guys remember Chris Weinke that, you guys know that name? He played quarterback at Florida State, but out of high school, he was a top-notch baseball player. So he signed, and he ended up, I don't think he made it to the big leagues. I think he made it to AAA. But anyway, he made quite a bit of money. He got he was a first-round draft pick, and so he got pretty good signing bonus. So I met him. He came back to school when he was like 26, which was a big novel thing. Here's this kid that's 26 and coming back to school, and talked to him. He had bought apartment complexes, and so he had been really smart with his money. And so rumor is, and I don't know if it's true or not, that Peter Warwick, who was our wide receiver that year that thought about turning pro, that Weinke bought him his car his senior year. Okay, the NCAA couldn't say anything about it because it wasn't from a booster, it wasn't from coaches or anything, but I heard that, I don't know if it's true or not, that Weinke bought him a car so he would stay in school. So that year, they ended up winning the national championship in 2000, so it turned out to be a good deal. But he was able to come back and do that because he invested, he took the deal and never even made it pros, but he took that big sign, that 2-year money is what's huge. It's guaranteed in 2 years. All right, so the solution to that, ask questions and make multiple offers. If you ask questions, you can get more information that may see how flexible the other party is. Multiple offers shows you're flexible, want to get a deal done. And I think at the end, if you read more into it, they end up offering 4.8 or 4.9, but over like 6 years. Okay, well, you would rather have 4 over 2 years if you're good, because at the end of 2 years, then what do you get to do again? You get to re-sign, renegotiate a contract. So if and that's the big dilemma. Do I take a 5-year, $20 million deal, or do I take $8 million for 1 year? Well, what happens if you have a bad year? If I take 5 at 20, I'm guaranteed 20, but that's 5 years of earning power that I'm locked in at that point, and clubs don't have to renegotiate with you. If you sign that deal, then all of a sudden your value blows up. You can have a bargain on your hands, but what happens if the club, and this is another good point, so you've got this player that you signed, and you signed him for 3 years for $2 million, which is not a lot of money. Year 2, the guy, you figure out you got an absolute superstar on your hands. Looks like going to be good for years. Am I going to ride that very cheap salary the 3rd year, or what might be a better strategy?
Incentive, renegotiate a longer salary, a longer period.
Because what happens if I don't renegotiate with him?
He becomes a free agent.
And is he going to have warm feelings about the club that made him play for that salary that he was way undervalued on that last year? Probably not. So in that case, you might try to renegotiate, raise that salary to get them to stay for a longer period of time. And some of you guys may, in your work, you may get employment contracts. It depends on what you do. And keep that in mind too. You can sign, I know at the school I was before, we could do 1, 2, or 3 year deals. Well, you would look at and go, well, I certainly want a 3-year deal because that locks me in. But what happens if you take that 3-year deal and all of a sudden somebody comes and offers you a job at the end of year 1? You're locked in for 2 more years. So if you're secure in your job and you feel good and you don't think you're going to get fired and you do a good job, then you might only want to take the 1 year because that gives you that flexibility. All right, any questions? All right, make sure to kind of read that article. It's really good. I think I told you what he's doing now. The kid never made a penny playing ball. He's changing tires at Costco. $10, $11 an hour. $4.04 million.
Did you go to college?
Nope, never went to college. He knew, that was the other thing. He knew all along that was a card. Oh, this is a good story too. Why kids? What happened, and the whole college rule changed, and it's been like 20 years ago. The kid's name was David Van Poppel, Todd Van Poppel. He was a left-handed pitcher out of Texas, consensus #1 pick in the draft, and this is back when the Braves just sucked. And I know that because I lived in Atlanta, and you pay $5 for a ticket, go to the game, sit in box seats. I mean, they were awful. So Atlanta says, we're going to take Todd Van Poppel. So Van Poppel says, yeah, if you draft me, going to University of Texas. And back in the day, you could go for 1 year. Do you guys know that? You could go to a major school for 1 year and then come back out. So, hey, I'm going to go play ball at Texas for 1 year, and I'm going to come back in the draft. So the Braves passed on him. You know who they took that year? A guy named Chipper Jones.
Yeah.
Out of the Bowles School in Jacksonville. How'd that work out for him?
Awesome.
He got a Hall of Fame player. That's why Chipper Jones went to Atlanta. Had Van Poppel not threatened them with going to Texas, to go to University of Texas, then he would have been with the Braves. He made a cup of coffee in the bigs with Oakland, I think it was. Never was hardly anything. Chipper, Hall of Fame career. So the NCAA came back in conjunction with Major League Baseball and said, hey, this is not right that these 18-year-old kids are being able to manipulate this draft. So the NCAA put a rule in that says now, and these guys know it, if you sign with a major college, you got to stay 3 years.
Yeah, it's the same deal with the NBA.
1 year.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me rephrase that. 1 semester. Okay. If you're Andrew Wiggins and you know you're going to be the #1 pick in the draft, you go to school past Christmas. Once you make your grades in the fall semester, then I ain't going to class. Okay, I'm signing an NBA contract. So that's a whole different deal. 3 years that's a game changer because now they don't have that leverage. Now they can go play independent ball, you can go play community college, but if you sign at a major institution, you have to stay 3 years. And that was predicated on that whole deal because they felt like these 18-year-old kids were kind of wagging the tail was wagging the dog in the whole draft. So, and you guys also know that they tell you your junior year is the year you should go, right? You guys know why? Most leverage. Why? What's your leverage? I could go finish my degree at the end of college. And so if you come out your 4th year, what's your leverage?
They know you.
Don't get your master's.
Yeah. And so it's not much, but it's worked out well for some. You guys remember Ramsey that was here a few years ago, what, 16th or something round pick his junior year, so he came back and tore it up and ended up getting first-round money the next year. So it's a gamble when you do that. But we even had, years ago, J.D. Drew, I don't know if you guys remember him, he got drafted by the Cardinals and never could sign, or Phillies, no, it was the Phillies he got drafted with, and he never signed a deal, so he went and played independent ball, went back in the draft. Cardinals took him, signed him to a big contract, had a great major league career. But it's a gamble. It's not as much gamble for a position player, just simply because of the things that can happen to a pitcher. Yes?
This is kind of about sports a little bit.
All right.
Okay, so wait, you said that Jalen, he tried to go in his sophomore year or junior year?
Who?
Jalen Ramsey. He entered the draft twice?
No. J.D. Drew.
Oh.
J.D. Drew. Okay, he was a baseball player here from South Georgia a few years ago. And it's been quite a few years now, but anyway, he got picked in first round by Philadelphia, and he refused to sign with them. He never got an offer he liked, so he set out a year and went back in the draft. You can do that also.
You didn't have an agent because in basketball you can't do that.
You can sit out. If you never sign, you're not committed to anybody, but you got to sit out for a year. You can't mid-season then go sign with somebody else. The draft works such that when they draft you, they have your rights for a year. And you can't sign with anybody else in the league for a year.
No, I thought like in basketball, if you say that you're going to the draft and you get an agent, you can't, and you don't.
You can't go back to school. Yeah, at that point you've blown your leverage as far as saying I'm going back to school.
Yeah, you can go back to school, but you can't play basketball.
Right.
You can't play basketball for you.
Right, you lose your eligibility when that happens if you hire an agent. And same thing with football now, it's 3 years, but the difference in football, you can be a redshirt sophomore, so you just have to be in school 3 years, and at the end of 3 years you can go out. And once again, leverage, because you can go back to school.
You can sit out for a year and finish your degree and just not pay for anyone?
Yeah.
And just train?
Yep.
I don't more people do that. I guess they want to get their feet in. So.
I mean, guys, if you can get, you just got to look at what the offer is. And think about, my advice would be keep it relative to what are your peers making with a college degree when they go out. What's the whole purpose of you guys being here?
It's a little knowledge.
Okay, to gain knowledge, but why? What's the purpose of gaining knowledge? To be able to sell yourself and to be able to show value. What is a job? It's you're trading your time for my money. Okay, I'm going to pay you for your time, my money. Well, what am I willing to pay for? You got to have a skill set that I want. So that's the whole purpose of college is so you can make more money. So and I tell kids all the time, and I upset some parents when I do. If your kid doesn't want to go to school, is good with their hands and all, why would you force somebody to go to school that doesn't want to go to school? What's the purpose in life? What's the goal? Okay. Be happy, but to be happy, do you need a minimum level of income? And yeah, that helps. Okay, so if you can, anybody know what mechanics bill out by the hour now?
A lot.
Yeah, on the Porsche, it's $100 an hour. Okay, so now there's overhead if you own your own shop and all, but the plumber now, to show up at a visit is $75 and then $60 an hour after that. What's the purpose of school? To get a job. If you're good and can do something without school, then why would you commit resources and time and all if you can make it? And I upset some parents when I say that because everybody wants their kid to go to college, but the purpose of college is to facilitate you getting a job. And if you have a way to do that without school. Now, one of the things I will say, and I'm a little bit of an education snob, and I told my kids they had several majors they could major in. Other than that, I'm not paying for it. No, I'm serious. Because what's the purpose? Why would I, and once again, I don't want to get in any trouble, but I told my kid, you cannot major in art history. I am not paying for that. Okay, because what are you going to do when you get out with a degree in art history?
Curator.
Now, how many of those jobs are there out there? And how much do they pay?
I have no clue about that.
Yeah, me neither. But it's not up there with some of the bigger businesses, I'm thinking. So, but the beauty of what you guys are doing, even if you can make it on your own and you guys start your own business, there's certain things you need to know, like basic accounting, finance, marketing, HR, and that's the beauty, and that's what you guys need to sell in your interviews with these people. I know a little bit about everything. Hey, I've started my own company. I know what it's like to deal in teams and work with partners where everybody's not doing an equal share and having to manage those people and the marketing challenges and everything. So that's why I love this major as an offset of business, because even if you start your own business, the legal forms, you guys will know enough coming out of this that you'll know to see a lawyer, do I need to do an S Corp or a C Corp or an LLC, and that's all the stuff that even that works inside a business. It's called, you guys ever heard the term entrepreneurship? So that means being entrepreneurial inside of a company. Well, why is it easier within a company to do entrepreneurial things? They got resources. You know, they got money. If you find a niche in a company that's not being met, those guys got resources, and you can make money for that company doing that. And that's why I had a guest speaker the other day, and I'm on the same page with him. I think Deborah disagrees a little bit, and that's fine. We just have different opinions. I like the idea of working for somebody first, because you find a good group that's going to put you on a training program and teach you skills. It was to me my success was predicated on working 12 years for Roadway, because they taught me what I needed to know to run a business, and I did it all while them paying me to learn to do it. That's a good gig if you can find it, and that's why the other thing, like this gig that Crystal was talking about. They're going to have to train you, right? Before you guys can help somebody compliant, they're going to have to invest some time and money in you. So now you've got a skill. Hey, I know what compliance for big corporations is like, or what I have to do. So that's why I look for just companies that have good, solid training programs, because that's an investment. If they're willing to pay you for 6 months to teach you something, are you making them any money during that time? Probably not. So what does that tell you? They're invested in you. And, oh, by the way, if you ever do leave, you get to take that skill with you. So that's what I would look for. And I would encourage you guys, the next job fair is going to be in February. You guys, it's still a little early to actually submit jobs, but you might find a summer internship. You might build a relationship. I mean, I have a relationship now with 3 or 4 recruiters that I'm able to take kids to, and I have no dog in the game. I don't need a job. But I meet these people, and I know what their organizations are like, and I'm able to help place people And they're good, solid companies, but I help the recruiters too. So, network, whole key. Learn people. All right, that's it. Have a good weekend.
Speaking of which, I'm leaving for DC today, so
Okay.
I'm gonna do this class on Tuesday.
Okay.
Because my flight lands in Jacksonville Tuesday morning.
All right, just make sure you get nothing.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
This section doesn't have.
Because there's no slides. It came from a different book of stuff that just, it's more practical stuff than it is academic stuff. So.
If you would like, I'm really willing to take any of your class and make it out. I thought I was like, I just noticed that whenever someone wasn't here, you want someone else, someone wasn't, you didn't. Yeah, during class, you want someone down. Gabriel Ferreira.
Just one day.
Yeah, so far this year I've missed 2, so I don't know.
Well, that's the late one, so
Okay.
you're on.
All right, sweet. Yeah.
I was like trying to ask.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't seem like you can come to a win-win. It doesn't seem like you can reach the goal.
I don't know. He listening. He's gonna be
Time runs out.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't feel like we're going to lose. Yeah. All right.
You're gonna make it sound way less serious. That's right?
Uninvited acts.
Let me say funny. Oh, what's up, man?